after the loud statement by American President Donald Trump that there is real hunger in the Gaza Strip, contrary to the statement by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that there is no hunger. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer stated that now Europe is taking on the development of a peace plan for the Gaza Strip. All past Israel-Hamas negotiations have failed, and the United States has fully withdrawn its negotiators from the talks. Overall, a real international scandal has erupted now, because Europe and even Israeli human rights organizations have stated that there is indeed hunger in the Gaza Strip and possibly even genocide. But at the same time, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu insists that there is no severe hunger in Gaza. Nevertheless, the Israel Defense Forces have introduced tactical pauses in the fighting so that the United Nations can deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. And in this situation, while Europe is preparing a peace plan, Trump agrees that there is hunger in Gaza. Netanyahu himself suddenly calls the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to discuss security in the Middle East with him. Such a move by Netanyahu, to put it mildly, surprised many people. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is July 29th. Let's go through everything step by step, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in the video description. So, let's go through everything step by step. United States President Donald Trump, in his comments about the current situation in the Gaza Strip, said that he considers the hunger problem to be real. Contrary to the statements of Israel's Prime Minister, Trump differed in his assessment of the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. With Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said over the weekend that there is no hunger there, Trump responded, quote, "There really is hunger there. I see it and it cannot be faked. That's why we will get even more involved. The United States plans to set up food distribution points in the sector, together with some very good people." The United States President, who had previously blamed Hamas for causing delays in the delivery of international aid to civilians, acknowledged that Israel is also responsible for restricting access to aid. He also once again called on the Hamas group to release the Israeli hostages who are still being held in order to facilitate negotiations. Netanyahu was clearly dissatisfied with Trump's reaction, not to mention the reaction of the Europeans, who are even ready to recognize Palestine. Nevertheless, yesterday a 10-hour tactical pause was once again implemented in the Gaza Strip, which the Israeli military plans to provide for a week in certain parts of the enclave to allow for the delivery of food and humanitarian aid. According to the plan, military operations in Gaza are to be halted from 10 in the morning until 8 in the evening local time. In 3 areas of Gaza, Al-Mawasi, the central part of Deir al-Balah, and the northern part of Gaza City, in order to allow the United Nations and other organizations to deliver food and medicine to the population. Interestingly, while Trump did acknowledge the hunger in Gaza, he was still careful with his wording. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, spoke more directly and called the situation in Gaza a humanitarian crisis and an absolute disaster. He emphasized that it is urgent to achieve a ceasefire and to free the Israeli hostages still held by Hamas. Starmer said that Britain is working with Jordan to ensure direct delivery of aid to Gaza. And here's where it gets interesting. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, held an emergency government meeting today, July 29th, to discuss the situation in Gaza and the proposed peace plan. Since he is under increasing pressure from his own party to recognize the Palestinian state, Starmer took an unusual step by convening the government during the summer recess to discuss ways to provide more humanitarian aid to Gaza. In addition, Britain is working on a peace plan together with France and Germany after a phone conversation between the leaders of the 3 countries last week. Starmer is not revealing the details of this peace initiative, but over the weekend he compared it to a coalition of the willing. These are international efforts to support Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire in the war with Russia. A spokesperson for Starmer said that he will discuss this plan with other international allies and Middle Eastern countries. Overall, Keir Starmer is trying to take on the entire peacekeeping mission for the Gaza Strip. Amid warnings that Gaza residents are facing famine, more and more members of Starmer's Labour Party want him to recognize the Palestinian state to put pressure on Israel. So far, Starmer has rejected plans for the immediate recognition of a Palestinian state, saying that he is focused on practical solutions. But now Starmer is taking the peace initiative into his own hands and has even presented his peace plan for Gaza to Donald Trump. Yesterday, on July 28, details were not made public. Nevertheless, in Israel, they agreed to these humanitarian pauses in the fighting, and a United Nations representative, Fletcher, emphasized the immediate need for extensive, urgent action. In particular, he called on Israel to speed up the issuance of permits for trucks to bring supplies into Gaza. And according to Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, this is the Israeli military body that controls the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. On Sunday, the United Nations and other international organizations gathered and distributed more than 120 trucks with humanitarian aid in the enclave. Another 180 trucks entered Gaza and are awaiting distribution. And in addition, hundreds and hundreds of others are still waiting in line to be loaded. At the same time, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees claims that Gaza needs between 500 and 600 trucks with humanitarian aid every day. And the day before, there were also cargo planes. The air forces of Jordan and the United Arab Emirates dropped humanitarian aid by parachute over the territory of the Gaza Strip, and 25 tons were dropped. But this won't replace delivering food by land. It's basically nothing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to sharply criticize the United Nations, stating that it now has no excuses left for not providing aid to the Palestinians. He rejects the accusation that Israel is deliberately starving Gaza's civilians, calling it a blatant lie. Quote, "There is no starvation policy in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza." He went on to add that Israel has provided the amount of aid required by international law, and he stated that Hamas is stealing this humanitarian aid and then accuses Israel of not providing it. Hamas denies stealing aid from collection points. In this regard, United States President Donald Trump stated that the Israeli authorities must decide on further measures in the Gaza Strip as part of the conflict with the Hamas terrorist group. As the United States President said, he doesn't know what will happen after the breakdown of negotiations on a ceasefire and the release of hostages, but nevertheless, quote, "Hamas does not want to return the hostages, so Israel will have to make an important decision." Trump claims that Iran encouraged Hamas to disrupt the negotiations, which ultimately broke down. Now it seems that Britain is taking the lead in developing a peace plan for the Gaza Strip. It's telling that just a few weeks ago, the United States President expressed optimism about the prospects of reaching a deal between Israel and the Hamas group, which would put an end to the military operation in the Gaza Strip. However, on July 24th, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, announced that the United States had withdrawn its delegation from Qatar after receiving Hamas's response to the proposal for a 60-day truce. Witkoff accused the Hamas group of, quote, "not coordinating its actions and not acting in good faith." And he added that alternative options for bringing the hostages home would be considered. While he did not specify the alternatives, it appears the United States has permanently withdrawn from the negotiations. But in this whole situation, Benjamin Netanyahu himself behaved rather strangely. On the evening of July 28, it became known about the third phone conversation in the last 3 months between Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and dictator Putin. Officially, the Russian side reported that the leaders discussed the Middle East, in particular interfaith violence in Syria and Iran's nuclear program. It is noted that during the conversation, Putin expressed support for Syria's territorial integrity and emphasized his dissatisfaction with Israel's interference in Syria's internal affairs. Putin's statement about the importance of supporting Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity caused such a sharp reaction and negativity in the Israeli media. After all, Russia, which has been waging a full-scale war against Ukraine for 4 years now, has no moral right to make such calls. Putin should just sit quietly, not stick his nose in, and not make any statements about territorial integrity, sovereignty, or interference in the internal affairs of other countries at all. Playashevo Chimo has no moral right to make such statements, considering his own actions. Besides that, during the conversation, Putin once again offered his mediation in the negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program. Following the United States and Israel's operation against Iran's military and nuclear facilities, the dialogue on this issue halted. Putin says, let me resume it, I will be the mediator negotiator. The office of the Israeli Prime Minister, in turn, only published a brief statement about the very fact of such a phone conversation, and they indicated that the topic of the conversation was Iran. And here I want to note that at the beginning of July, the Israeli broadcaster Khan reported that Israel is conducting secret diplomatic negotiations with Russia regarding Iran and Syria. After all, the Jewish state considers the Russian Federation as a possible channel for de-escalation with both countries. During the intense United States nuclear negotiations in June, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov stated that Moscow is ready to remove highly enriched uranium from Iran and turn it into civilian jet fuel. This could have been a potential way to help reduce disagreements between Washington and Tehran over the nuclear program. But all these secret and semi-secret negotiations between Netanyahu and Putin are not particularly liked by the Europeans, who seem to be only ready to increase pressure on Netanyahu. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles created by